Hey guys, LotusStreams here, coming at you with another review, and this time we got a single model review because apparently there's gonna be a model for Inquisitor Eisenhorn, which is one of the protagonists of many books and whatnot. I haven't read all of them, but he's a pretty cool dude. He is very interesting lore-wise, and obviously it's really cool to have him on the board with rules as well, because that was not the case before. Now, I'm not going to talk much about the model itself. I'll leave that up to the modelers and painters and whatnot to complain how much they hate the resin and whatnot. I'm talking about rules because I want to see whether or not it's good to use him. And obviously we have to see how he interacts. Now, that being said, I play Inquisition myself. I played it a lot in the 7th edition, not so much in the 8th, but I found some stuff that works. They're still fine to play, just very differently from before. But this guy actually has a really interesting trick up his sleeve that will interact with that said codex. Now keep in mind, this is not a codex, it's an index from Imperium number 2. So everything he interacts with and the rules he comes with refer to said index. I'm very interested if they actually make some sort of a real Inquisition codex thing. I doubt it. I really hope they do, but for now we will use the interaction between the rules from the index and him now. Alright, so first of all, he is a Inquisitor. You can see that in his profile. Inquisitors nowadays are rather squishy because, as you can see, he has the basic human leader statline, moving 6, weapon skill 3, strength 3, which is really weak, toughness 3, and then 5 wounds. He has a lot of wounds. That is something that is different from him to other humans you normally have, and he has 4 attacks, which is normal for Inquisitors, just not for the basic human guy. And Leadership 10. Leadership 10 is actually not that easy to get nowadays, and this will interact greatly with one of his abilities, which I'll talk about later, so keep this in mind. Leadership 10 is a really good thing. Then comes the problem. He only has a 4+ save. Unfortunately, Inquisitors lost their abilities to get power armor, and I mean, Terminator armor still exists, but it's only for Auto Malleus, which he's not. He's Auto Xenos for sure, as you will see very soon, because no one else would probably even allow him to be in the Auto for that matter. Xenos is the most, let's say, usable one if you want to go outside of the box, which is what Inquisitor Eisenhorn does. The one thing he has going on for him is he has a 6+ Pheno Pain, but he does not have an inborn save. So this guy can get absolutely obliterated once he gets out in the open. Any last cannon shot can take him out in basically one go, because he won't get any saves, and the damage will add up really quickly. So in terms of survivability, not that much. Now, in terms of what can he do? He has the ability Quarry, which is essentially a ability granted by the Auto he's a part of, which is the Auto Xenos. Auto Xenos basically says everything that's not Imperium or Chaos is a Xenos, and you get to reroll once when hitting and wounding, I believe. It's the weakest of all of them because the Auto Hereticus and Malleus both get full rerolls, which is actually quite a big deal in these matchups. So they're still very specific, and so is he. Authority of the Inquisition. Now this is a big one because this is something that actually messes with Warhammer 40k and allows Inquisition to play very similar to 7th edition. He can basically take any transport that is from the Imperium and take it. He can go into a drop pod, he can go into Repulsor, whatnot. He can take anything. And that is a big deal, and you have to keep this in mind for his interaction with his dear buddy that we will talk about right afterwards from the Malus Codicium. He has the ability to get into the back line because of the interaction with the drop pod. And now keep this very much in mind, because the majority of the Inquisition extra units, the complicated ones, do not have authority of the Inquisition and thus cannot embark into transports, but he can. Alright, Unquestionable wisdom is also something very common to Inquisitors. He gives his leadership to everybody around him. Obviously, this is really good for all kinds of Imperial Guard related issues, because having high leadership is actually really nice, especially considered that the commissars got nerfed and his is leadership 10. So giving this around in an AoE is a really, really good ability. And talking about that really good ability, the next ability straight up removes this ability. So once per battle, instead of having unquestionable wisdom and losing your leadership bubble, because you're doing something super evil, which is, I find, really fluffy actually, he can read from his Evil Knievel book, which is the Malus Codicium, so the bad book or something, or the bad tome, how you translate it, and he can summon a Demon Host within 6 inches of him. Now, as I said, he can go into drop pod. The Demon Host can now basically deep strike, because it is summoned in exactly like other demons are. You have to stay away from an enemy, has to be within 6, you have to pay reinforcement points, which is, by the way, 25. But this demon is very special. He has some interesting abilities while he's next to Inquisitor Eisenhorn. I'll talk about him right away, but we will finish Inquisitor Eisenhorn before I'll do the actual Demon Host, because the majority of players will probably not even know what a Demon Host is or what it does, because it was never a very used unit for any purposes, pretty much, not in any edition that I know of. Now, he is a Psyker, and actually a pretty good one, because he can manifest 2 powers, denies 2 powers, he knows 2 powers from the Telestathian discipline, which is again from Index Imperium 2, and he obviously knows Smite. Now, in case you don't know what the psychic powers do, you can subtract 1 from enemy leadership and no Overwatch, which, by the way, coming out of a drop pod, very good, because you can launch him with everything else that you want to get into close combat, and then deny Overwatch, which is a really, really big thing against certain armies that include re-rolling a lot and have some special anti-deep striking capabilities. In this case, you can gimp their ability to do so and make sure something like a aggressor squad can't get their massive Overwatch. Next thing would be auto-passing morale checks, and it's a super low charge, so just great, makes something basically immune to morale, in addition to having this leadership 10. And keep this in mind, in case he loses the leadership 10 bubble with this ability, you can still would have the ability, if you want to cast it with him. So there's your option to make up for that one. And then the next thing is very interesting, because Tzeentch has very similar powers. You can mess with a character. He has to be within 18, so again, drop pod probably useful, because he's not gonna get there on foot, most likely. But that character you choose can be even Gilliman, for example, 1 attack or 1 shot against a model of your choice. And believe me, 1 hit from a big guy that is a character can hurt tremendously, especially if it's a war boss or something like that that has massive close combat power. So you can basically turn somebody against their will and whatnot. That's the 3 options we have, and inclusion obviously is Smite as well. And as I said, we can get into Smite range quite easily, much easier than the others. And obviously that would make him pretty useful in terms of just straight up psychic support. Now he is 100 points, keep this in mind. So if we value his stat line, he's obviously not worth the 100 points, but being a Psyker, basically level 2 in all senses of the word, that's actually pretty good. That's better than most other Imperial Psykers have. So next thing would be his Wargear, to see how much is he actually worth. He has the Artificer Bolt Pistol and Electro Bearing Grenades. That's his 2 range options. They're actually very similar in terms of profiles. The Artificial Bolt Pistol is range 12, pistol 1, string 4, AP -1, damage 2, and doesn't have any other ability than this. So you can use this in close combat. Obviously, it has a little bit more punch than a normal bolt pistol, which is nice. Electro Bearing Grenades are range 6, so pretty low. Grenade 1, string 4, AP -1. Damage is 1, by the way, it's not 2. I think I copy pasted there for an arrow, and it causes mortal wounds on a 4+, and on a 6 you also get I believe it's D3. I don't know, he is specialized against vehicles basically. That's his only option he has there. In close combat he has the Barbarizator or Barbarizator, I have no idea what it's called. It's a melee weapon, strength user, AP -3, D3 damage, and it allows you to get +1 to hit rolls if you use this weapon. Why not? It's essentially a force sword with a better effect than usual, which is actually quite valuable. It would be like, I think, 8 points, and having the ability to get access to it, obviously. And then he has the Rune Staff, which is his other option, and funny enough, it's not one of these, yeah, he has to have it because of his fluff. It actually makes a difference whether he uses this one or that one, because it gives you strength +3, so bringing him up to strength 6 instead of strength 3, which is obviously his major issue most of the time. His strength is just not high enough to hurt anything. So now you get to wound even Eldar on 2s, and even I mention Eldar here because he's obviously Autoxenos, so his favorite enemy is obviously a Eldar HQ. He can smack it around with his staff, wounds it on 2s, hits it on 2s basically, which we'll talk about later. But at the moment he's hitting on 3s with the staff, and then you get -1, and you don't need more than -1 because they have an invuln save anyway, which means the AP is lost, and both weapons deal D3 damage anyway, so the damage wise it's pretty similar. The only question is, do you need more strength or do you need more AP, and then you can choose whatever you want to. So he's actually pretty versatile in that case. But as I said, his weak base strength is what holds him back the most. I mean, 4 attacks is pretty good. The problem is more the impact of those hits. So in terms of Wargear, I'd say he's an additional 10 points or whatnot. Basic Inquisitor maybe 50, 60. So we're paying 40 for being a Psyker and having the abilities that he has. And that's pretty much all about him. Now let's talk about the Daemon Host real quick, because obviously this seems to be a big thing for him, right? He doesn't have any very special interactions to something like this other than the Daemon Host. A Daemon Host is a 25-point model, which you have to pay because it's arriving from reinforcements. It's move 6 usually, but it can move up to 12 because of its demonic power. It hits on 4s, ability skill 4, and then strength 6, toughness 6, 5 wounds, 4 attacks. This is all not normal. This is something that the Inquisitor gives to the Daemon Host if you summon him in this fashion. So it's a basic stat line increase that is really, really big. It's very powerful. It has a lot of more wounds, and that will also interact very, very greatly with its demonic power, because he can basically recover all of these wounds just like that. It's completely random whether or not it does it, but it can recover the entire wound pool, and the bigger the wound pool is, the higher likely it is that it actually stays alive long enough. The 4 attacks obviously makes it close combat better because it has a warp grasp, which is basically just a power sword, so it ignores all kinds of saves, but it doesn't have much damage output in our total. But having more attacks obviously helps out a great deal with this. The next thing is, if it is near Inquisitor Eisenhorn, it will gain +1 weapon skill. In this case it gets +1 to hit, and +1 to hit applies to everything, not only weapon skills, also ballistic skill, and +1 to wounds also. So that's pretty nice. On toughness 3 it will wound on 2s no matter what. On the other ones, and my headset dies. But you know, it's fair enough. Leaving us with one problem. It's a 5+ in one save, and a 5+ in one save in this case with a 7+ armor save, which is laughable. But the 5+ in one save also gets increased +1 while being around the Inquisitor. So essentially everything that is bad about it gets better if it is around the Inquisitor. Now in terms of abilities, I already said 2 of them. It can move 12 and fly if you get the 1 or 2. If you get the 3 or 4, you remove any wounds. And then the last thing is d6 for each enemy unit within 3 inches. On a 2+, the enemy unit suffers d3 mortal wounds. And now this comes into effect. Because this sounds nice, even for a normal Demon Host, even without the stat increase. But the Demon Host will never ever get into the position where he would get this one off. And obviously it's a 1 out of 3 chance to get it off. There's 2 big problems that prevent the Demon Host being played at all. Next thing is, the Demon Host does not have anything to help it in bargain to a transport. It cannot actually move across the battlefield faster than with his own feet. There is no transport in the game that will allow it to go into a transport. The Acolytes, for example, do have the ability. These guys do not. So Demon Hosts are actually pretty hard to use, and this one is way better. And it has the ability to get into position wherever it wants to be, because the Inquisitor has the ability to reposition himself and then summon it in all of a sudden. There's also one other thing that is special about this Demon Host in comparison to others. It is a character. That is actually really, really nice, because obviously it can't be targeted as easily as it would otherwise. It can do heroic interventions and everything that comes with being a character. So in this case, you have a decent close combat guy that is actually pretty tough to kill, and he keeps regenerating, so you have to kill him one go, which is obviously not that easy. He is running around with his 4+ invuln save, so heavy hitting stuff will not take it out as quickly as you would say, although it will still buckle under high strength, low AP value attacks, because it doesn't have a very good save on its own. And obviously the things it can do are still random, although there are now abilities that allow you to reroll this with the dice reroll and whatnot. So if you really need that bomb to go off his energy torrent, then you could try to get it off by yourself. Alright, so I think this Demon Host has some potential to use. I would just use it in case I wanted to have an Inquisitor in their backlines anyway, and then Eisenhorn would be a better choice than a different Inquisitor, for example Greyfax or whatever you wanted to do, because the other Inquisitors have one big advantage. They cost pretty much the same, but they have better all-around abilities. It depends exactly on what you need, but the Auto Malleus has some better anti-demon options, and obviously the for example, Inquisitor Greyfax has some interaction with Psychers as well, and the Hereticus is obviously something that will be used quite often, because Psychers are pretty good this edition. They're not as rare as in 7s. The overall thing is, would you use him over these guys? Because it is an Inquisitor, same slot, same idea, and so on. I don't think you would use him unless you were trying to get that Inquisitor into the enemy backlines, and at that point he can do the same thing as the others as well. He can take the psychic power and he can try to make it happen. The only problem about him is his squishiness. He's so incredibly squishy. If he gets in close combat with somebody, he might deal some damage, but most likely he's just gonna fall over and die. That's all I expect from him once he gets into close combat. So he's a little bit like a company commander, but even more squishy, which is a issue, because that's one thing that happens to company commanders as well. If the enemy ever gets their hands on them, they just die. And for 100 points, it's actually quite an investment. For in comparison, if you have Courtiers, Courtiers can actually punch some people in close combat if he wants to. A Auto Malleus Inquisitor in Terminator armor will obviously also be a little bit more durable, and obviously they have the same abilities, they have the same access to the powers, so they could also try to replace him here. That's why I think that's why I put the focus here on the Demon Host, because that was this is what makes him truly special in comparison to the other Inquisitors, and that's where you would want to use him, and it would be pretty fluffy as well. It fits his fluff to have this ability, because he's a very radical Inquisitor, and probably both the Auto Malleus and the Auto Hereticus would probably kill him if they would ever get the chance to actually find him. but he still works for the same side, so he's still considering Imperium, because he uses stuff that the other ones would hate him for, but he would still use these in order to get the Imperium forward and not the opposing side. So a little bit of a twist there. Alright, but that's all about him. So I hope you guys enjoyed this short video. I think I said everything there's to say about him. If you have other questions and whatnot, or if you want pictures, just Google them. You will find him eventually. It's a young version of him. He is a little bit older now, but I think it's a fine model to have, because Inquisition does not have really that much new models, unfortunately. And I always enjoy if they make new models. I just wish they would make more models for the basic troops instead of only adding HQs, but that's the point of the Inquisition, right? They send one guy. They're usually not known for their army or anything. They just recruit them from other arms of the Imperium. But that's something I would wish for in the end. But I'll take what I can get as long as it's Inquisition. Alright, so as always, happy wargaming.